Kalamazoo County voters will find an important request on their ballot this November. The 2020 affordable housing millage in Kalamazoo County. In essence, voters are asked to approve a slight increase in property taxes to reduce homelessness in the county. I'm Ben Lando. I'm the publisher of Now Kalamazoo, and joining me are the co-chairs of the Homes for All campaign, which is advocating for voting yes on the millage. Among wearing many other hats, Stephanie Hoffman is the executive director for Open Doors Kalamazoo, which provides low-cost housing options to people and families experiencing or at risk of homelessness. And Chris Burns, a member of the Portage City Council. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you
Thanks,
for
Ben.
having us.
Stephanie, the ballot says that this 8-year millage will raise $6.375 million in its first year. So if approved, how will this money be utilized?
So when you take a look at that 6.3 figure, that is an increase in the millage from a 0.10 to a 0.75, where 0.25 will go back into rental subsidies for families with children. And that piece has been expanded as well. In 2015, it was passed to address housing issues and homelessness issues for families who had school-age children. Now we'll be able to expand that to families with all children, and not only families with children, but our single adults, our seniors, our vets. It will do a lot more. And the 0.5, we are looking at being able to really impact our housing shortage that we have throughout the county with renovations, rehabs, and potentially new builds for multifamily and single family dwellings.
And before we get into some of the details of how it would be used if it was approved, Chris, what does this mean to a homeowner or a business owner paying property taxes? How much would they be paying if this passes?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. For a homeowner with a market value home of $100,000, they would be paying $38 a year in property taxes to fund this. And that's an increase of maybe 27 or so over the current millage.
This is the property with you said a market value or a taxable value of $100,000?
That would be a market value of $100,000, and then the taxable value is typically around half that.
Sure. Okay. And you said they'd be paying an extra $35 a month. A year in their property taxes.
Yep. So the way we look at it is if your home's worth about $100,000, you're paying about a dime a day. It adds up to be about $38 a year for someone in that situation to go towards a critical need for the county, which is to expand our housing stocks for low income folks.
Sure. And who's in charge of deciding how to disperse that money if it's approved?
Yeah, so the intention of the program is it's going to be a Kalamazoo County level program that it works between the Kalamazoo County Board of Commissioners and the Kalamazoo Public Housing Commission to administer the funds. That's the design of the current 2015 program that was passed in the county that's going to be expiring if this current millage doesn't get passed.
Sure. And so the 2015 millage, the 0.1 mils that was approved, and it raised somewhere between $800,000 and $1 million a year, spent primarily on helping families in the county that have school-aged kids keep housing or obtain housing if they didn't have it. Why not just renew that? Why ask for more and for more money than just renewing what they've been doing for the past 5 years? Stephanie?
I would say this. So whereas the Vote Yes for Kids campaign has done tremendous things for about 500 families with school-age children, but since 2015, we've seen an increase in our homeless rates and our housing insecurity rates amongst our citizens and our residents. I prefer to call them our brothers and sisters within the county. And so when you take a look at that, although it was really, really good for 500 families, we really saw where we were missing the mark as it pertains to serving all individuals who were in need of affordable, permanent, quality, energy efficient housing. And so when you look at that, coupled by the fact we just don't have enough housing within the county. On August 5th, when it went up for approval with the Board of Commissioners for the county, every commissioner stated that there was a housing shortage within their district, right? And so how do we create a housing ecosystem, improve it, where we can bring buildings, bricks and mortar to our community where we have an opportunity to serve more? And that can happen in a myriad of ways. And so that's what we were looking at when we asked about and really pushed for not only an increase, but an extended period of time. Because it's taken decades for our community to get to this level of housing insecurity and homelessness. And it's going to take decades to get us out of it. So we want to be very bold, and we want to be intentional, more intentional this time, about being able to serve all when it comes to housing.
And Ben, I would just add for families with kids. So the current millage was serving kids with, or families with school age children. So age 5 up to high school. Well, if it's good for kids age 5, it's certainly good for families with younger kids as well, 0 to 5. I'm a foster parent, and they spend a lot of time teaching us about the impact of trauma on kids in early development. As a parent, those formative years, even before kids are age 5, are super important. And so we think being able to serve families with younger age kids as well, we need a little additional funding to do that, but is critically important for helping to overcome some of the systemic issues we have with intergenerational poverty.
Sure. I wonder if Chris, you could get into the value proposition with this. It goes beyond, I think what you both are getting at is it goes beyond just helping a family with a kid in school maintain their house, but it addresses the problem that was bigger then and has increased in the level of crisis that the county is in.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, when I started to get really interested in affordable housing for Portage in particular, I sat on the city council there, was when FedEx announced that they were bringing a new distribution center to Portage that was going to bring 800 jobs to town. It was going to makes FedEx our 3rd largest employer in Portage. And those jobs pay $14 to $15 an hour, so not bad. But I took a look around. If you're making that kind of money, you can afford an apartment of around $700, rent around $700. And when I looked at the time for these 750 employees, there was maybe 20 units. I can't remember exactly how many that were available in the county. And so what we think is that there's several ways that this is going to benefit the overall community. I mentioned the benefits to developing children. Of course, that's important for everyone. But if we're able to be successful in, for example, rehabbing single family homes and making those affordable, everybody's property values are going to go up as we take care of some blight in the community. In addition, if we design the program right, I think it's possible that we can unlock some additional state and federal dollars that can come into the community to make some of these big apartment projects happen. Most of those get funded through state tax credits from MISHDA. And if we design our program to make it more competitive to these state tax credit applications, well, then all of a sudden $1 from our county property taxes may unlock $3 or $4 or $5 of additional state and federal money to get these projects done. So I think we can be really efficient with this money, and I think we can really make a big impact on the availability of rental housing that people can actually afford for the jobs that are available in our county.
Sure. What I'm hearing is that it's the issue, the crisis, it's so complex, and there's a lot of interrelated factors at play. Stephanie, you were involved in the city of Kalamazoo's recent ordinance changes that gave protections and rights to tenants to help more people have the ability to find a place to rent. So it seems like that both those changes and this millage are pieces of a larger puzzle. So taking it as a step back, what does that puzzle look like when completed, and what pieces are still missing?
Let me say this about the housing equity ordinance that was passed last Tuesday. I'm still overjoyed and I'm still
Mhm.
feeling the remnants of the excitement from that. Because what it is going to do is it's going to protect source of income. So, for instance, for families or individuals who have a voucher, no longer can a property owner blanketly say, we don't accept vouchers, right? Because at the end of the day, when you take a look at the representation of voucher holders here in Kalamazoo, it's people of color. And so, you know, when you look at those hidden and coded ways of blocking people out, this ordinance, that is just, and that's just one piece, right? And when you talk about criminal backgrounds and you think about desperate impact with our judicial system, who we know have baked in inequities and injustices, uh, no longer can you use a blanket statement and say, no matter how old your criminal background is, we don't accept people with felonies. One example in doing some of our community outreach a couple of years ago, there was a 66-year-old man who was still homeless because he had a felony, nonviolent, from the 80s. And so that when we talk about housing equity and that ordinance, that's what it means. And I also want to say this, like, now the hard work begins with getting it implemented and really putting things in place, right? And so when I think about what we've been able to do at the city of Kalamazoo level, and what this current millage will be able to do, coupled by that, we are going to change the game for families and individuals within the county. The other piece that I believe is going to be very, very key and important with the millage, we will be able to go to the philanthropy sector and say, look, this is how all of the citizens and how county government is stepping up. And now how do we even bring that in? And I think we are at a very sweet time. And I think COVID had a lot to do with that. Like, COVID caused us as a community and nation to wake up to some of the blaring and glaring inequities that people of color have been facing forever. And so now there's this sense of, okay, we're connected in some way. And so to be able to bring in nonprofit, philanthropy, government, county, city, township government, we've not been able to do that. This is the first time, and that's what has me excited about the possibilities of what we're going to be able to do. So everything is happening in divine time. And when you bring up, Chris, about FedEx coming, you know, what if they said, well, you know, you don't have the housing stock here, so we may need to, that would have been a huge loss for our community, right? And so we have a responsibility to really partner with for-profit industry and get this work done and really provide quality, safe, affordable housing for all. That's where we are, and that's what we're going to be able to do.
Sure. So addressing the issues of homelessness is not just a matter of empathy or basic dignity and human rights, but it's also economic development, a benefit for economic development to do that. So we were talking about the city ordinance, City of Kalamazoo ordinance. So Chris, pressure's on in Portage for you. But now we're talking about the countywide millage request, and it brings me to a question that I had a year and a half ago when Now Kalamazoo was reporting and preparing for a magazine that we published, a special edition deep dive into the homelessness crisis in the county, called The Home Front.
Yep.
And one major takeaway was that while there are many individuals and organizations involved in certain tactics in addressing homelessness, and some of them are also successful in addressing issues of homelessness within their own specific sphere, that the overall approach hasn't worked. That there is no countywide leadership creating and executing a strategy. And while there's a lot of progress being made on many fronts, it seems that still remains an issue and an obstacle to actually reducing homelessness to the level that we all want. how
I
are
can,
we? Yeah, please.
yeah, I can jump in a little bit on that topic, Ben. I think what will be really interesting to see if this millage passes is now all of a sudden county government has a carrot to offer to local government to say, hey, we've got incentive money here that can help get your housing needs addressed in your particular underlying community. And that's a tool that hasn't been in place yet at all. So what you have currently are, I forget how many local units we have, 23, City of Portage, City of Kalamazoo, all the townships, working in their own planning departments, trying to address their own housing needs with nonprofits in town, with developers in town. But we don't have the Kalamazoo County government taking a broader view over the whole picture and saying, where do we see housing needs and how can we marshal resources together? And I think now, just as an example of how this might work, one really important component of getting these state tax credits that I mentioned earlier is local property tax support. If you can say that, your application looks a lot better. Well, what if the county government, for example, offered to refund, the city of Parchment, for example, on a property tax abatement for a low-income housing development? So now you've got this carrot out there that's available potentially to help both new projects get these housing tax credits and the local governments get the projects in the communities that they need. So I think this can go a long way potentially to helping coordinate a plan for all those 23 underlying jurisdictions.
I believe this. I mean, you're both involved in both your work in your volunteer efforts in issues related to homelessness and directly and indirectly related to homelessness. Is this both of your first time in such a senior role at such a county-wide, like, massive effort on something that would raising $6 million plus a year to address the issue? Is this is both your first time kind of leading the way for the county?
For me, it is. Open Doors was very key in the Vote Yes for Kids campaign. But I sat back and I learned a lot and I gleaned a lot of knowledge during that time. And there were so many powerhouses around that table. And that work began years before. So to be in this position right now I count it an honor and a blessing, but it is huge for me. And so we have a campaign manager, Kevin Waterman, who is very proficient in his role as campaign manager because he served on the county commission for some years. And then we have the mastermind, Dave Artley, who was the chair of the Public Housing Commission, and he was also, he's a retired county administrator. And so, and then Chris himself, I'm honored to be in the presence of all three of those men, but they needed a little ladylike stuff in there too, so they allowed me to serve with them. But with them, they make my role here much more palatable. And I'm just honored to do the work with them. But this is definitely the largest and the first at this level for me.
Yeah, and Ben, I serve on a couple sort of more county-oriented boards. So I'm on the Metro board, which provides the bus service and dial-a-ride services in the county. And that's a really helpful experience to consider for this program too, because I think they have a very well-structured governance structure, and they work really well to provide service across the whole county. And I think it's a good model because they also are able to attract a lot of federal and state dollars into our community to make that program run as well. So I think it's a good comparison to think about the bus system too. But I should take a moment to say that it's not just the four of us that Stephanie mentioned. We've got a steering committee that's got leaders from across the community, bipartisan leaders, folks who work in the nonprofit sector related to housing, and they've been a real joy to work with. And I'll pull it up here in a moment. I'll give you the information of the folks who've been helping us guide this campaign, because it's not just the four of us either.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. So some of the most vocal support for and involvement in policies to address the homelessness crisis in the county have been people who have been doing the work, activists, people who experience it firsthand, those who work in the system like you all. Have you gotten any major endorsements or public support from other sectors, from the business community, from neighborhood organizations, from religious groups, anyone else that I'm not thinking of?
I was actually in a meeting last night with First United Methodist Church, and this was some of the discussion about the millage. They really wanted to know what was going on with the millage, and so we were able to do that. And what I'm finding is, as I'm meeting with nonprofit organizations and leaders thereof, they totally get it and are on board and are willing to endorse and also disseminate our information, because it really affects all of their clients and the families and individuals that they serve as well. So for me, my experience is that people are very supportive and they see and honor the need of what we're trying to do and get accomplished.
That's right. And I'd add, we're still early in the campaign. So in terms of community endorsers, we're just getting to that point. But we do have financial support from a number of folks, including big employers in town like Bronson Hospital, that see the need and understand how this can make the whole community better. And on that note, I'll just take a moment to go through the folks who are on the steering committee with Stephanie and I. We have County Commissioners Jennifer Aniano, Zach Bauer, and the County Board Chair Tracy Hall, Mary Balkema, the County Treasurer, and then from the nonprofit sector, Michelle Davis, the CEO of Housing Resources Inc., Toby Hannah Davies from Isaac Kalamazoo, another member of the Kalamazoo Public Housing Commission, Latoya Haywood, Sarah Jacobs. This is one change from Ben when you published the Homefront, is that since then the United Way of Kalamazoo and Battle Creek has taken over the Continuum of Care, which is one of those sort of resource marshaling groups. Matt Lager from Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing Services, Betty Lee Ongley, the former mayor of the city of Portage. I missed Mike Quinn, Kalamazoo County Commissioner, and Norm Young from Housing Matters. So it's a really great group of extremely knowledgeable folks that are helping to guide, not just to get a yes vote, but also provide a little bit of input to those county commissioners on how the program might be best administered after it passes.
Those who are just blanket against increasing taxes, regardless of the rationale behind the increase in taxes. But I'm wondering if there has been any opposition yet, and what do you say to people who say, I'm opposed to this? What do you?
For me, I have not had that question come up, not yet. We anticipate there will be some. However, we understand the need and the value. Did I freeze up?
Nope.
Oh, okay. We understand the need and the value of every human being within our county. And so to continue lifting up the possibilities and the love and the light that we can dispense as a county and a community is what I choose to focus on.
Sure.
And Ben, to the extent we've had any opposition, it's been from community leaders who say, the millage we're asking for is not sufficient enough. They would like to ask for a higher millage. So there was a really large group, even beyond the steering committee, that got together, I believe it was back in January or February, pre-COVID. And at the time they were talking about 1.5 mils or even more money. So we've got something that we think strikes the appropriate balance for affordability for property owners in the community, but also will really move the needle on the stock and availability of affordable housing.
And I want to interject a little bit more about the limit. And, you know, there was a survey that was conducted by a group called EPIC. I can't think it's an EPIC, but they did a survey of 500 households. And it came back that our community was ready to step up and do something overwhelmingly. And so, but the sweet spot was that 0.75. I was one of those in that meeting in February who were like, no, we need to do a full meal. And I'm not compromising because our people are worth it. But that was what was most agreeable. And so that's what made us go with the 0.75.
Great. Lastly, when we talk about homelessness, many times the conversation goes back to some old tropes, either about homeless people or about wanting to keep people's money in their pocket and not kind of pull the money together for a collective good. So I'm wondering if we could talk, or you can remind people, who is at most at risk for experiencing homelessness, and those that do, who faces the worst of the potential consequences of being homeless.
So when you think about Kalamazoo County and you think about our demographic breakdown, Black folk are 11% of the county population-wise, but yet we're almost 64% of the homeless population and housing insecure rate. So that lets us know that there is something systemic that is happening and that we need to address that. The other thing is it's not just the family or the person standing on the side of the road with a sign. A lot of our families, and I like to call them families without homes, because homeless has this negative connotation, right? As if someone is deficient. So our families who are experiencing not having a home, they're going to work every day. They're going to work every day. Before COVID, their children were in school, and yet they were doubled up, or they were staying in a extended stay hotel. So that's really the truth of what homelessness looks like in our community and really around the state and country. It is people going to work every day, yet our employment and our pay has not kept up with the cost of housing. And so when we think about homelessness and housing insecurity, it's not just we don't have enough housing stock. The wealth gap contributes to that in such a major way. And we will have an opportunity to really educate ourselves and educate the public. And what we believe at Open Doors is that any family or individual success starts with a place to land that's safe, a home. You cannot obtain or sustain stability without having a home that is affordable, that is quality, and that is permanent. And so the thing about what we're trying to do is not just about homelessness, but it's really about bringing more opportunities for home ownership and for permanent supportive housing to our community. So it's going to be a myriad of ways that we are going to address our housing sector and how we do business as a community moving forward. So I think my final take would be homelessness is not relegated to the person with the sign. Homelessness is a husband and wife going to work with 2 kids, and they're living in a Michigan basement in their mother's house. But yet they're both going to work, and they have 2 kids, and they cannot afford the move-in costs, no less the rent that we have right now. So we want to address now, and housing is the first level. And then once we get families in there and get supportive services and get them in, then we can start talking about the wealth gap within our community. But first, they need a place to live.
I've been talking with Stephanie Hoffman, the executive director of Open Doors Kalamazoo, and Chris Burns, a Portage City Council member, talking about they're the co-chairs of the Homes for All campaign, which is advocating for a yes vote on the November ballot of the 2020 affordable housing millage question offered to Kalamazoo County voters come a month and a half from now. So thank you both for your time, for talking with me about this campaign.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. One final plug, just make sure everybody, when you get your absentee ballot, look all the way to the back where our question will be on the ballot. Thanks.
Important. Thank you.
And vote yes.
Appreciate it.
And vote yes.